Wow, aren't we lucky to have heard that original recording of a schoolboy being caned with a metal ruler? A rather morbid scene to share with you, but fascinating to hear. Hello and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. I have just looked at my Spotify Wrapped. I know some of you don't listen on Spotify, but it's given me some lovely statistics that have come through this year. I'd say the one that hit the hardest was 27 different countries have been listening to this podcast. That's great, isn't it? That is some good reach. So if you're in a country that isn't the United Kingdom, not to discount the United Kingdom, I love you guys if you're listening, but hey, there was some great other countries in there. Lots of countries in South America, countries in Asia, countries around Europe. Fantastic stuff. Thanks for listening. And 80 of you crazy cats had the final couplet as your top 10 podcasts listened to this year. So that's nice. That's lovely to hear. Well done for listening to that. That's a lot of Shakespeare you've consumed. Almost too much, I'd say. If you're not careful, you're going to start writing sonnets yourself. We might have another bloody Shakespeare on our hands. But in all seriousness, the Spotify Wrapped really highlighted that there are some people that listen to this, and I know it's niche. It's not for everyone. But we've had a lovely year, and I really appreciate you listening. Now, let's move on to our next sonnet. Sonnet 86, of course. Was it the proud full sail of his great verse, bound for the prize of all too precious you, that did my ripe thoughts in my brain inhearse, making their tomb the womb wherein they grew? Was it his spirit, by spirits taught to write above a mortal pitch, and struck me dead? No. Neither he, nor his compeers by night giving him aid, my verse astonished. He, nor that affable familiar ghost which nightly gulls him with intelligence, as victors of my silence cannot boast. I was not sick of any fear from thence. But when your countenance filled up his line, then lacked I matter, that enfeebled mine. So there we have it. Sonnet 86 by William Shakespeare, and you'll be pleased to hear it's looking at the same theme as Shakespeare, sort of talking about other writers, getting a bit jealous, but in this one there's a little twist. You might have heard that he was talking about ghosts. He's getting spooky on our asses, and we're past spooky season, thank you very much Shakespeare. We're in the festive season now, so come on Shakespeare. I do like when he brings in some supernatural elements. It makes me think, he's got a lot of supernatural stuff in his plays. It's nice that it comes out in the sonnets every now and again. We haven't had fairies and stuff like that yet, like in Midsummer Night's Dream. That's something we can maybe look forward to in the next 70 or so sonnets. Hey? Maybe a bit of fairies and stuff like that. But for the moment, we've got ghouls, we've got ghosts. So let's dive into this line by line and work out what the hell Shakespeare was going on about in Sonnet 86. So we start with, was it the proud full sail of his great verse, bound for the prize of all too precious you, that did my ripe thoughts in my brain inhearse, making their tomb the womb wherein they grew? I know that's not one line, but as I like to say, it's all one thought, so let's break that down, shall we? So he's saying his great verse, and here we assume that he's talking about a sort of rival poet, I suppose. And he has talked about rival poets in his last few sonnets, but this time it seems like he's focusing in on one specific rival. And he's saying, was it his amazing, incredible poetry written to win your attention that killed my thoughts before I could put them into words? So he's starting off with a bold question here. He's saying, was it my rival's incredible poetry that silenced me and actually stopped me writing sonnets? Is that what put me off? That's the initial question. Then he continues with, was it his spirit, by spirits taught to write above a mortal pitch, and struck me dead? So he's asking another question here, and here he is bringing in spirits and ghosts. And he's still talking about the other writer, the rival poet. And he's saying, was it his talent that was inspired by supernatural spirits that stopped Shakespeare writing poetry himself, that struck him dead? So this other poet, he's sort of suggesting that he has been taught by these spirits that are maybe elevating his writing beyond the natural, taking him into a supernatural realm. So he's sitting down with these ghosts and ghouls, maybe ghosts of long dead poets, the greats of before Shakespeare's rival's time, and he's getting taught all these great ways of writing. It's an interesting point from Shakespeare, isn't it? It's quite left of field. He hasn't mentioned any of this stuff before. Almost like he's taken a few hallucinogenics and come up with this idea. So he's asked these two questions, and then he says, no, neither he nor his compeers by night giving him aid my verse astonished. So he's answering the questions. He's saying, no, it wasn't him, his rival, or his nightly helpers who visit him at night and help him write, who left me stunned, astonished. So it wasn't him or his little ghost friends. God, what a bizarre sentence. Why is he bringing ghosts into this? And why is he suggesting that his rival is getting help from ghosts? It's all very bizarre, but I quite like it. It's quite spicy, this one. You'd be a bit worried to receive this as a sonnet if you got this from Shakespeare. You go, is everything all right, mate? Are you okay? Are you seeing things? Are you been taking anything recently that might affect your vision? You know, there's some worries here. And he continues with, he, nor that affable familiar ghost which nightly gulls him with intelligence, as victors of my silence cannot boast. So this is really the same thought, and he's saying it wasn't him or his little ghost friend who tricks him with fake wisdom every night. They can't claim to have silenced me. It's not them. So these ghosts were originally helping, but they're also tricking him? I think that's what he means by nightly gulls with intelligence. So sort of giving him fake bits of wisdom. So actually these ghosts are a bit of a nightmare. They're pretending to be great and giving Shakespeare's rival all these great pearls of wisdom, but actually it's all fake. Or a lot of it at least. These pesky ghosts. I was not sick of any fear from thence. This is pretty self-explanatory, but he's saying I wasn't sick because of any fear of them, basically. So forget the rival and his ghosts. Again, sort of summing up what he's been saying in the previous lines. And now we're on to the final couplet. That came around quick, didn't it? But when your countenance filled up his line, then lacked I matter, that enfeebled mine. So this, I think, is when the jealousy is kind of kicking in, because he's saying, when you looked admirably or favourably upon my rival's writing, and you made it by doing that, by giving it the attention, you made his writing even better, that is when I suddenly couldn't say anything. It silenced me, and actually made my writing feeble and pathetic. So it's almost like Shakespeare's muse, Shakespeare's lover, is sort of feeding his rival by giving his poetry this attention, and that's actually making his poetry better, and that is what is silencing Shakespeare. So it's not necessarily his rival and his ghoul friends. It's actually the fact that you're Shakespeare's lover is reading this poetry and enjoying it and fueling it. That's pretty pure jealousy, isn't it? By the sounds of it to me. So really he's being a very jealous lover, saying don't read this rival's poetry and don't give it the attention, alright? Because that is making my writing bad and making me very angry. He didn't say that he was angry, but I get an angry vibe from this one. Very strange section with the ghosts and ghouls. Don't really know why he's talking about that, because actually they don't seem to be the thing that he's annoyed about. The jury's out on why they're there in the middle. Maybe just writer ghosts were on Shakespeare's mind when he was writing this one, and so he thought he'd pop in a little section about it. But it's not really about them. It's more about his jealousy. Anyway, I think it's about time we put this to our story. And if you remember last week, Shakespeare, he'd done this masterclass. It went down well. He went back home. Christopher Marlowe, who Shakespeare had chosen to be the subject of this masterclass, suddenly started receiving all of these sonnets from the young writers that attended the masterclass. And that made Shakespeare pretty annoyed, because Christopher Marlowe was reading all these poems and going, yeah, these are great. I love this. I love people saying lovely things about me. I mean, who doesn't? You can't blame him. Meanwhile, Shakespeare was getting a bit annoyed by this, because he just assumes that Christopher Marlowe could receive his thoughts of love just through osmosis, through the air, just by thinking, oh, I love you. He thought that was enough for Christopher Marlowe, but it clearly isn't. So he went away and he wrote a poem to explain why he wasn't writing more poetry about Christopher Marlowe and about all the thoughts of love he had for him. So let's see how that sonnet goes down with Christopher Marlowe and how Sonnet 86 fits into all this. Shakespeare finishes reading Sonnet 85 to Christopher Marlowe. Marlowe looks up at Shakespeare and says, oh wow, I didn't know you were having all these thoughts about me. How would I possibly know that? Shakespeare looks at him and says, well, you should have been reading my mind. I'm sorry. You should have been reading my mind. And Marlowe says, Shakespeare, that's ridiculous. How could I possibly read your mind all the time? That's insane. And Shakespeare says, look, that's why I wrote this sonnet, because I just needed to explain to you that, look, all these other poets, they can write all they want about you and how amazing you are, and their poems are all right, but I'm actually thinking these things. And that's maybe why I haven't written so many poems about you, but I love you, and just remember that I'm always thinking nice things about you. Christopher Marlowe says, well, thanks for explaining that in a sonnet. You know I love sonnets about me, and I guess I've been thinking nice thoughts about you. They embrace, and then Shakespeare notices a sonnet lying on the floor unopened. And he says, what's this one? This is a sonnet that you haven't read yet. Marlowe picks it up and goes, oh, I better read it then, shall I? This will be the last one that I read. And Shakespeare says, fine. I'm sure it's not going to be as good as my poetry, that's for sure. Marlowe reads. His cheeks flush red, and then he starts crying. With happiness. Shakespeare, this is one of the most beautiful poems I've ever read. This is stunning. Shakespeare said, give me that. Let's have a look. Oh, it's by Ben Bloody Johnson, is it? And as he read it, he too began to weep. Oh, this is actually pretty good. Oh, I hate it. I hate that it's good. God damn you, Ben Jonson. Shakespeare ran up to his little study and thought, God, I'll never be able to write poetry like that. That was incredible. It's because he loves Christopher Marlowe so much, and Christopher Marlowe is so beautiful and so hot and so sexy. It's fueling Ben Jonson. This is horrible. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And over the next few days, Ben Jonson sent more and more sonnets, each one more and more beautiful. Shakespeare thought to himself, there is no way that Ben Jonson is writing these on his own. His writing style has reached a whole new level. It's crazy. So he put on his black overcoat and went out into the night to Ben Jonson's house. When he arrived, he went round to the back garden and peeped in through the kitchen window. There was Ben Jonson, and surrounding him were some white, ghostly figures. They were laughing and cheering and had glasses of wine. Shakespeare thought, wow, this is a hell of a jovial atmosphere. Ben Jonson was writing away while the ghosts were chipping in little ideas on how to make the sonnet better. Shakespeare gasped. Everyone looked at the window, but Shakespeare ducked quickly. They returned to the writing, and Shakespeare once again glanced through the glass. He couldn't believe it. Ben Jonson had somehow conjured these poets of the past to make his writing better. What a bastard. And then there was a knock at the front door. Shakespeare was still watching through the window as the ghosts disappeared and Christopher Marlowe walked into the kitchen. Shakespeare gasped again and ducked as the two of them looked out of the window. There was nothing there. Shakespeare peeped again. Ben Jonson was telling Marlowe to sit down. Ben Jonson took out his quill and wrote sonnet after sonnet about Christopher Marlowe. Marlowe would read each one of them, smile, laugh, cry, weep even. This went on for hours, and as Shakespeare watched, he realised that perhaps it wasn't the ghouls that were making Ben Jonson's writing better. Perhaps it was the fact that Christopher Marlowe was inspiring him so much and encouraging him to write. And he realised that he needed Christopher Marlowe's encouragement. That would make his sonnets better. He didn't need ghosts, he didn't need ghouls, he didn't need writers of the past. He needed love and encouragement from the love of his life. Upon this realisation, he quickly scrambled down from the window ledge and ran home as quickly as his little feet could take him. He ran up to his writer's room and scrawled Sonnet 86. Christopher Marlowe eventually returned at 1 a.m. Shakespeare was waiting for him by the fire. "Ah, Marlowe, you're here. Where have you been?" Marlowe says, just seeing a friend. And Shakespeare says, "I know where you've been, Marlowe. There's no use hiding it. You've been at Ben Jonson's and he's been writing lovely poetry about you. I saw it all." Marlowe went red and said, how did you see?" And Shakespeare said, "I was at the window the whole time." "Well, I'm sorry, Shakespeare, but he's a marvellous writer, and I love hearing his sonnets." And Shakespeare says, "Yes, I can see that. And, in fact, having seen it, it has inspired me to write a sonnet of my own, to explain my feelings, and to ask for your encouragement." Marlowe says, "Shakespeare, I'm tired." Shakespeare grabs him by the scruff of the neck and says, "You must listen to this, Marlowe, you must." And with that, he pulls Sonnet 86 from his back pocket and reads, Sonnet 86. Was it his bloody amazing poetry, written to win your attention, that killed my thoughts before I could put them into words? Was it his unbelievable talent, inspired by the spirits of dead authors, that silenced me? No, it wasn't him or his nightly helpers who visit him and help him write who left me stunned. It wasn't him or his little ghost friend who tricks him with fake wisdom every night can claim they silenced me. I wasn't afraid of him or his power. But when your beauty filled his poetry, I had no words left, and it made my writing feeble. So there we have it, Sonnet 86, and Ben Jonson has been writing with some ghosts and ghouls. But has that made his poetry better, or is it the fact that Christopher Marlowe is giving him so much attention? Is Shakespeare onto something here? Find out next week on the final couplet. Until then,